I think the big mistake that people make in general, making big transitions, whether it's a living situation or even a business pivot, is you go all in really quick. Better to fail in a little change than a big change. People invest a ton of money into these courses, building online courses, and we've done something similar, and then nobody comes and buys, right? So learn, just us personally learn from our mistake is, hey, why don't we just do a one-time webinar? They're going all in, investing a lot of money and time onto something really big, and then it doesn't work out. Why don't start smaller? And even if it doesn't work out, it's not a big investment, and you're not out, and you have a plan B. Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Hey, Thriving in Tandem family, welcome to this episode.
Hi, you guys.
And we are fresh off our return from a month in Lake Norman.
Right on the water. It was so beautiful.
So if you listen to the past two solo episodes, quote unquote, we were recording the last couple episodes, solo episodes, at our lake house retreat, so to speak, in Lake Norman, thinking about that area as a potential place to live, meeting with people, connecting with people, building relationships. And now we're back, and boy, was it a trip coming back. At least part of it was a little bit unexpected, right?
Yes, it was. We had a great, wonderful time. Like you said, met so many great people and enjoyed ourselves.
And so, as you may have heard, is that, we're kind of potentially dealing with a potential major transition, moving from the West Coast to the East Coast. And there's still some things we need to work out. We haven't made quite a decision yet, but we thought this would make a good episode because you get to look behind the scenes, pull back the curtain, so to speak, to hear how we process a potential major decision, right? Moving is always a major decision, and especially when you're going all the way across the country.
Yeah, it's a big, long ways distance.
I was originally born in Hawaii, but really grew up in Northern California, up in San Jose, since I was 9 years old. So I'm pretty much a California native almost. Kaylee?
I'm a total California girl. I've lived here all my life, and I never, ever thought I would move. Well, I never thought I would move to LA. And no, I never thought I would possibly even consider moving out of California.
And I've been here in Pasadena, in this location, in this home, for 23 years. And of course, when we got married and she moved in here. So for both of us, 18 years, almost 19 years next month, really, we've been in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And we made friends.
We have a lot of stuff.
Here we go. And so, anyways, all to say is, dealing with any kind of major life transition and business transition will create conversation as husband and wife, right?
And it's very familiar here for us. I mean, me living here for 19 years in the same house, it's like I'm comfortable with the neighborhood, people.
So, I'm sure we've all been there where we have to make a major decision, and sometimes even minor decisions, but it can create some significant conflict in our relationship. So we don't want that to happen. And
we don't.
And things can get heated sometimes, right, in the midst of it. And in fact, before we hit record,
I know he was going to say this.
Well, we're actually on our way back.
He's only talking about me.
I wasn't going to tell us about you. Oh. Why do you think it's always about you, honey?
Okay, well, that's good. It's not.
It's about us.
Oh.
And, we're on our way back from the market. We just did a quick errand. And I said, yeah, let's record the podcast. And she said, what's it about? Told her the other day. So I told her again what we're talking about. And then we started having this conversation about, the move and, how we're feeling and all that kind of stuff. And so even before we hit record, we had a conversation about this, right, honey?
Well, I'm sure there'll be many more conversations to come, but yes, we did.
So this whole potential move really started, really in 2021 when we first were introduced to Lake Norman and found it was a beautiful area. When I looked at the price of homes in that area, it was, relatively affordable, compared to Southern California prices. And so that started kind of the thought process. And then, the following year, we went out and visited again when we were on our book tour, when we launched our book, Tandem, The Married Entrepreneur's Guide for Greater Work-Life Balance. And we stayed, I got an Airbnb, surprised Kaylee, got an Airbnb on the lake.
It was a great surprise too.
Yeah, 3 days on the lake, kayaking, enjoying the weather. The weather was perfect. It was just beautiful views every morning. You wake up to this beautiful lake view out our bedroom window. And then last year we were back again. We didn't go to Lake Norman, but we were in Charlotte. We were invited to speak out there. And then this year coming up, we started, we've been talking about it, lightly here and there. And so late last year, Kaylee suggested, hey, why don't we spend a month out there?
Yeah, I felt like it's a step of action that we're taking and of faith, because it's so easy to say like, oh yeah, I wanted to do that. And like 10, 15 years later, you never did it. And so we are stepping out for the Lord to either open a door, close a door, or guide us in the direction of where he wants us to be.
Yeah. So, as we'd been talking about even before this trip about what we would do, the move, or just whatever, fill in the blank, whatever major transition. I think as husband and wives, we deal with this potential transition differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I look at it probably a little bit more logically. Just here's the facts. What do we do? You're more in tune with potential feelings, right?
Yeah, and I think too, possibly is growing up. I think you told me you moved like 15 times, so you've moved a lot, and I've only moved a couple times my whole life, maybe a handful of times, and so I don't have all those experiences that you have of making new friends and just somewhat what to expect, maybe, where I have no idea.
Yeah. And I remember when I met Kaylee, I told her, I'm not in any hurry to move. Even though I had that experience as a kid moving around a lot, I didn't like it. It definitely taught me how to be resilient and to make friends, but I still didn't like the move. And so I've been here in this home for 23 years, and the longest I've lived in any one spot. And I'm not in a hurry to leave unless there's a good reason. And so as we were processing this potential move, we had talked leading up to this trip, we had talked about, what we would do. We don't want to just pick up, sell our place, and then move. Like we've seen other friends do, and then they've learned to regret it. Right. And so we knew that's what we didn't want to do, was just pick up and leave. We wanted to how can we test the waters first? Right. And so we, when Kaylee suggested, so we would talk about renting a place for a year. We'd rent our place out for a year, and we rent a place out in Lake Norman area for a year, which is great because financially it would be actually beneficial, because we can make out based on, I already did some research on what some lakefront condos and apartments would be, be on the lake and just rent a place for a year. And I was like, oh, we can cash flow this, so I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Right. So didn't have to worry about the financial part. And, being the way the market is here in Pasadena, it'd be easy to rent out this place for a year. And so I said, okay, that makes sense. That's good. So that way we do have a plan B. If we don't like it, we can come back. Right. And then when you suggested, how about we rent a month first? Well, that's even a smaller baby step, right? Where we say, okay, let's go out for a month and let's check out the area and see if, hey, is a year, could we do a year?
And work from there at the same time. It was a gal that we had stayed at 2 times before. It was an Airbnb, so I had her phone number and I texted her and I said, would you be interested in renting the month of March out to us? And she said, let me talk to my husband and get back with you. And she got back and said, yeah, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, so we rented the place for a month. They even had 2 golden retrievers that
Robert fell in love with. Pippa became friends with them.
Pippa finally became friends with us. They're kind of big, right? Pippa's, if you see it on YouTube, she's not very big. She weighs 5 pounds. She's a Yorkie. And so even though she's always curious about other dogs, but still, when they start coming up in her face, right, she's going to back up because, they're a lot bigger than her. And then there's 2 of them. And so when we first got there, they were all happy to see us, and they came running, and they come running up to Pippa, and Pippa starts going right behind Kaylee.
hiding behind me. And then in the morning, they're hanging out at our door because they want Robert to come out and play with them and pet him.
Yeah, which I didn't mind, but unless they just got out of the lake.
Because they love swimming in that lake.
They love to run in.
And they're in and out all day long.
And so when they came running and I could see them dripping, I said, "Oh, no, stop." They were very good. They were actually very well behaved. When I told them to stop and stay, they would stop and stay. They would run up to Pippa, but they could clearly see Pippa wasn't into them, so they would stop. They wouldn't. They had like an imaginary boundary that they wouldn't cross. So they were actually really good with Pippa. And then by the end of the month, I said, I'm my focus, my purpose here.
Your purpose.
Part of my purpose for this living here for a month is gonna Pippa and Darby, the one that's always wanting pets. They're gonna be friends. And so, sure enough, last week they were able to tolerate each other. Pippa was able to tolerate him more. And anyways.
And we also were able to work from there, so it worked out great.
Yeah, so we kept a relatively normal schedule, as well as made sure we take time to look around the lake, and we went to some open houses just to see what was out there. Looked at some potential apartments and condos to rent for a year, on the lake.
Drove around the whole lake because it's big, just to see some of the different areas. Yeah. And that's another reason why we don't want to buy at this point, is because we don't know what area we'd want to live in.
Yeah, and then we already knew quite a few people between either having them on our podcast, like Dave Sanderson, who was the survivor of the Miracle on the Hudson, that plane that crash landed on the Hudson River 16 years ago.
So listen to that episode on our podcast. That was a great one.
Yeah, that was episode 160 something, 163, 68, something around there. We had Chris and Jamie Bailey we've had on our podcast very early on in our podcasting history. A couple people that we knew just in connection with our church, a couple people from my mastermind group, and then a couple people that people just introduced us. And so, between different walks of life, we met some people, met with people, and just built relationships. And it was a really good time, and it was sad to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so peaceful and quiet and just beautiful.
Yeah, and so, anyways, that's kind of a little bit about our process of trying to test the waters, not just jump right in. But even in the midst of it, there's all these that's just the practical side of things. But then there's the other side of just like, questions that we're going to have is, are we going to like the place really? Are we going to like the area? And Kaylee, I know your big one is, can I make friends? Mm-hmm. Right? Can I tolerate the pollen in the spring?
That's another big one, yeah.
The weather gets a little colder, and it gets a lot hotter and humid in the summertime, right? So there's all these living situations and relationship questions that we have, and so we've had to process that too, right, Annie?
Yeah, you've been processing that, helping me to process through a lot of that stuff.
And in fact, we just were talking about that earlier, right?
Before we got on here, about, I don't know, half an hour before.
Yeah, and so you're saying, how come you're asking me why I haven't shared any fears or whatever, and I'd say maybe a couple of years ago, maybe there was. I mean, we didn't, I wasn't in any hurry to jump right in and move. We talked about it, but I wasn't in any hurry to jump in and move. And actually, over the last couple of years, since we have been talking about it, like how will we do this, how we would kind of ease into it, how we would kind of test the waters. To me, for me anyways, that has settled my emotions, because I know, number one is, we're not buying a place anytime soon. So we're not committed to this, right? We do have a plan B. We can come back, right? So at the very least, it'd be a year break from Southern California in the traffic. Well, there's traffic there too, but on the lake, there's no traffic. And we, have a year on the lake, basically, right? And also being on the East Coast, I mean, everything's so close. It gives us an opportunity to really see a different part of the country, which I'm looking forward to. And, even on our road trip we got to. So, there's so many pluses to it. And then the friendship side, as you were talking about, honey, I asked the question, like, I mean, who are we going to miss? I mean, we have friends at church and all that. I hope they're not listening, but, we have friends, but like when we move, like, are we really going to miss them? I mean, we don't really get together with much of them like on a regular basis, right? And we like them and we love them. At the end of the day, it's like when we leave, like, are we going to be missed? Are they going to miss us, or are we going to miss them? And I mean, we will, but at the end of the day, is it going to change our way of life?
And a lot of our friends have already moved out of California.
Yeah, some of probably our closest friends we ever had at our church are gone. They're out of the area, right? And so, and it just takes time to really build those deepening relationships, and also just seeing the kind of even the transition of our relationships, that I feel like we could really do life with some of the people that we were meeting with and met with, while we're in Charlotte, in the Charlotte Lake Norman area. In fact, the one couple that we just met, we didn't know them previous to the going out there, but we were a couple people from here, from home, were trying to connect us. They said, "Oh, you should connect," and we never got on Zoom or whatever for whatever reason. But as we're heading out to Charlotte, I thought, "Oh yeah, that gal Nadia lives out in the Charlotte area." So I just messaged her, and she said, "Yeah, let's get together." And so we had dinner with her and Damien, her husband, and just hit it off. And then we had dinner at an Italian restaurant, and then they invited us over to their house like a couple days later.
I know, I thought that was so sweet of them.
Yeah, and had just a great time, and just really connecting. And we're also very like-minded. I mean, just so many things. And so that was just one example of a couple and several that I feel like we could do life with, right? And of course, so anyways, all that to say is, on the relationship level, I guess I'm comfortable that we would be able to make friends and good friends later. It's not going to be right away. I realize that. But, over time, I think as we're more intentional with connecting with people in the area, being involved, whether it's our church or local community things or chambers or business associations, whatever, that we would make those relationships, but also even just on the East Coast in general. I think just our involvement with the U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce and all those things involved, there's so many opportunities to really deepen some relationships. So I don't know, what else you got to say?
Well, and I just want to say, to our style of making decisions is that, especially big ones, that we don't do anything unless we both have a piece about it.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, I think I think the big mistake that people make in general, making big transitions, whether it's a living situation or even a business pivot, is you go all in really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And as opposed to just moving in baby steps, right? Because it's better to fail in a little change than a big change.
Mm-hmm.
I know just in our, when you're talking to other, say, coaches and consultants in our field, people invest a ton of money into these courses, building online courses, and we've done something similar, and then nobody comes and buys, right? So learn, just us personally learn from our mistake is, hey, why don't we just do a one-time webinar, see who shows up, and what kind of engagement we get on that webinar, right, before building out a whole course. And even you can do even a series like maybe an online course, but it's live, right? Say a 4 or 6 part series, and you record that as you're doing it live, and that could be a potential course, at least the first rendition or MVP of a course. So that's just an example of how you, just like what we're talking about here with the move, is you take baby steps instead of going all in, investing a lot of money and time onto something really big, and then it doesn't work out. Why don't start smaller? And even if it doesn't work out, it's not a big investment, and you're not out, and you have a plan B, right?
And, go ahead. And for me personally, baby steps seems a lot more approachable and not so overwhelming as just the end result, and we just got to jump in. And then I'm like stressed out and trying to figure out everything. So, and then it drives him crazy. So,
and then you were saying even earlier when we were talking about this, how you could feel your heart rate going up.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that about?
I guess probably a lot of the unknown. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, we got to hurry up and do this. But then when we talked about it again, and it's going to be a continual conversation, I'm sure you're like, no, we're not going to do anything. It probably won't be till next year if we were to move. So we have plenty of time to get things done. And then that kind of just eased down my feelings, anxiety, because I know I have plenty of time to do it and I don't have to like hurry up and do stuff, rush things.
Yeah, that's an example
because we have a lot to do.
Yeah, that's an example of how, husbands and wives are different in how they're going to approach this, right? Just how you're dealing with the emotion of the potential change, even though we're not going through the change right now. Well, we kind of are in a sense, but even though we're not moving tomorrow, but just the thought of it, I think, can raise, the heart rate of one spouse or sometimes both, right? And so kind of talking through it and say, hey, we're not making a decision now, right? We're just talking through. And then that way, because what happens is if emotions start to running high, you can interrupt the person whose emotions are running high, you can interrupt the flow of brainstorming because you're like, oh, you just start getting upset and it makes the other person upset just because you just feel the anxiety of it. And there's no reason to be upset, meaning since we're not making a change, there's no point of being upset, but we have to appreciate and understand why you're upset, right? So that's why I asked you, why's your heart rate up? And say, okay, hey, we're not moving. Right? We haven't made a decision.
I don't know maybe there's people that love to move, but it's a lot involved in moving. Even if it's just a couple blocks. I hear people say, someone the other day we just met up with, they're like, oh, we just moved a couple blocks and it was a lot.
Yeah, and I don't want to move.
But we were talking about, I said, oh, it'd be nice if you were to check in with me just to see how I'm feeling. And because I'm more, if you haven't noticed, the audible processor. Robert's the internal. And sometimes I'm like, can you please talk with me? what you're thinking or feeling?
And at least in this case, it's true in some other things. I don't always communicate what I'm feeling, but at least in this case, I think I have. It's just that it's been over 2-3 years that we talked about this. So for me, just that longevity of discussion, and we've talked about how we'd approach it and how we're not going to go all in. And I would say, okay. And then we did the month. I said, that's good. And then I really enjoyed the area. I think we both said, hey, we're sad that last week of our trip or of our stay there in Lake Norman, we're sad that it was our last week. Sad that we're leaving, and almost, I don't say sad that we got home. I think this is familiar, but I do miss, where we were. And so I can definitely see us going back for a year. And so now it's about how do we get our place ready to rent out so that we can make that next step as far as the move. So anyways, I hope this helps as far as, hearing, what we're dealing with as far as a major transition in our life and how we're going through it and how we're, talking about it. So again, it's anytime you're facing a major transition, try to chunk it down into smaller steps and then to just take that first step and knowing to have a kind of a plan B or a backup plan that you don't have to go all in. It's not just all or nothing, right? Which I think in most situations there is a middle ground or baby steps that you can take, and you don't have to go all or nothing. But sometimes some people just want to jump all in, and that's where a lot of mistakes happen. That's where a lot of frustration can happen, a lot of conflict can happen in the relationship. And then if things don't work out, then what, right? You got to make a whole nother major transition. And so anyways, I hope this helps. And so thank you for listening.
Yes.
A little bit behind the scenes with us, and hope this helps. Go ahead and share this with another married entrepreneur that probably could hear this as well and learn from this. And so
and email us, you guys, and let us know what are some big decisions that you are making in your life. We'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, where should they email us to?
Do you want me to give them your address?
info@powercouplesbydesign.com. info@powercouplesbydesign.com. Go ahead and email and tell Kaylee hi.
Yes.
All right. Until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.